You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I know cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are watching the Joint Broadcasting Production Team here at the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network, putting together a great joint broadcasting project. We are working with Pace Radio Network today with Al Graham, and we have as my joint host today, Al Byrne. Al Byrne is our in-resident joint host, and we'll be talking a whole lot more with him and Al Byrne, who does his own show, his own program jointly each week with his friends on his broadcasting network. And remember, every time you hear the word joint on the big joint interview today, you want to hit your joints, your pipes, your vaporizers, anything that you utilize when you take time for hemp. Al Byrne, why don't you introduce Al Graham to our joint audience who are enjoying this with their joint friends today?
Thanks, Casper. Yeah, folks, Al Byrne here, and I'm introducing Al Graham. Al is a great first name. I've always enjoyed mine, and I always like meeting other Als. So Al Graham and I have talked before. I've actually had the pleasure of being interviewed by him on his Pace Radio show, which is, well, he'll tell us about it, but it's up in Canada way. And so it gave me the opportunity to speak to some Canadians about medical cannabis, which is sort of my specialty, and veterans issues of any kind, and any veteran of any country. I work with guys that are in South Africa, in Ukraine. We've actually met some Ukrainian soldiers, Australia, Thailand, Canada. They're all over the place. And we all have similar issues. So some of these shows that Casper and I will do in the future will sort of concentrate in that venue. And I hope you enjoy them. Right now, though, Al Graham in Canada has been doing this work for a decade or more. And basically he's on the same page I am. I believe in education, knowledge, and that's what Al Graham does. He does very well at taking knowledge, people who are educated, have some experience in what they're talking about, and showcase them. And that's wonderful. And if you guys haven't checked into some of his stuff, it's there on the internet, and you ought to do that. But anyway, Pace Radio Network is now we're kind of symbiotical with these guys. They're going to help us, and we're going to help them. And it's headed up by Al. And with that introduction, can I call you a Canuck? Is that like a bad word or a good word?
A Canuck. I don't know. We have the Vancouver Canucks, and they are in the still. No, they're not. They just got eliminated from the NHL playoffs. So,
all right. Well, I just wanted to check because I don't want to piss anybody off in Canada here. We're just starting out.
You can call me a Canuck. I don't know any bad thing towards.
We have a token Canuck here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words, Al and Casper. PACE, people advocating cannabis education, as you can see on the sign behind me. That's what PACE stands for. And that's what we do. We advocate about cannabis education. We've done things at cannabis events as well as non-cannabis events. And going to non-cannabis events was always important, whether it was at a farmer's market or at a health show or just doing something local. At a fair where I participated in 1 year. I had a booth in there. And that allows you to reach out to people who are non-cannabis in order to try to bring them into the fold, to understand the benefits with cannabis and how it can help patients. So because of my past with in my writing experience, when that ended, or getting close to ended, I was invited by a fellow by the name of Casper Leitch at Time for Hemp to join him as a joint broadcast on his network. And then he offered me my own show, which created the Pace Radio Show. And that was back in
2011, 2012,
somewhere around there.
2013.
2013, yeah, because I'm saying it's 11 years old, correct? So 2013,
Yeah.
and I was working with you as a joint host here and there, or filling in, or helping get some Canadian guests on Time for Hemp, and before my own broadcast with you, and then eventually it went from having just the Pace Radio Show to the Pace Radio Network. And I've had as high as 10 different broadcasts on the network. Presently, we have 9 different broadcasts that go out, and we cover everything from news to interviews, patient stories, as well as psychedelics. We discuss that. We have psychedelic programming. We have other content providers who are providing content with us, such as the Veterans Action Council, Humboldt Grace Project, and now Time for Hemp. And we are all people advocating cannabis education.
We certainly are. And I remember hanging out together at the Treating Yourself Expos. We had a couple of those where we let the whole country of Canada know how important it was to end cannabis prohibition. And those were courtesy of Marco Renda, who did a great magazine called Treating Yourself Magazine. And I tell you, we had a lot of fun doing those. I remember that boat trip that Marco sponsored and around Toronto, and the whole expos that he did together were always world class. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. They were really sad. It was really sad when they were no more because of their importance, and so many people were getting educated by going to the expo. With at that time, I think it was somewhere around about 110, 115 vendors, and there was advocacy rows as well as businesses, educational places. People could get all kinds of information. There was the movies that were being released right there, like What If Cannabis Cured Cancer by Lynn Richmond, which was a very, very important movie. We got to meet people like Dr. Robert Malmamine, rest in peace, good doctor. Dr. Courtney was there as well. And people could get educated. And people came from other places, other countries from around the world in order to find out about cannabis. So
yeah, it was amazing. Marco had a huge audience for his magazine. And because of that, you're right, his events did attract a large global presence.
And the thing is that it was in a federal government building. It wasn't hosted by some big consortium or whatever. It was the federal government building where it was being held, and it was the first one in Canada. And it's not like the ones today. In Marco's day, that was before legalization, before laws were put into place. We had a 4,600 square foot vapor lounge inside the building. Now cannabis isn't even allowed to be vaporized inside the building. Seed companies from Europe, from South
and you
Africa.
and I were talking the other day about how we were recalling when Jody Emery and Mama Kind were on an airplane together and vaped in spite of what the authorities thought.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. But, back in those days, before legalization, those laws weren't in place. And, like Toronto had 9 or 10 vapor lounges. But as soon as the cannabis became legal, and they put the cannabis here in Ontario in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, people couldn't smoke or vaporize inside the vapor lounge anymore. So they all closed. It was against the law. So we lost the lounges because of that.
Wow, sounds like Castro's kid is following in his dad's footsteps. I mean, it sounds like Justin Trudeau.
That was actually a provincial thing that had nothing to do with the federal government. Smoke-Free Ontario Act. It's so as far as the network, as I mentioned, it's been running for 5 or 6 years now. We broadcast obviously on Facebook, YouTube, we're on LinkedIn. Where else are we going? We can reach 35 destinations in total if we want to.
Nice.
But it just depends. I don't run to all those at time because it's just gets spread out to so many places that sometimes when you want to sort of keep an eye on some things, sometimes it's good to keep it to a smaller group of destinations. But it works out well. We've done very good. We've talked to a lot of patients to learn about their situations, as well as learning. When you learn about their situations as far as their condition that they're treating with their cannabis, not only does it, or they themselves are educating the viewers and us as advocates. We're learning as well, even though you don't have that particular condition. It's good to know what the benefits are with cannabis on it, so that in case you yourself come across somebody, maybe a family member that is ill, and then you can say, hey, I saw this show about this guy that used cannabis in order to help him with his Crohn's disease, and he's gone basically 20 years without having any opiate prescriptions. Which is what I've done, other than being hospitalized. And these days, as you know, between Canada and the U.S. here in North America, it's a big opioid situation, and cannabis can be a benefit to it.
I do.
Right? Yeah.
I do. And it's because of the medical aspects of this plant. I was blessed to be able to meet Al Byrne. I met Al Byrne through Patients at a Time. There was a handful of people who'd been part of that organization who were also guests on my little broadcast, Time for Hemp. At that time, Time for Hemp was reaching people all around the world. I had a huge audience on American Freedom Radio, and we were like pioneering the broadcasting aspect of internet, and one of the very few broadcasts ever on cannabis. And because of that, we were lucky to draw a lot of great guests as well. And many of them were also part of Patients at a Time. And I kept bumping into Al Byrne here and Al Byrne there. And then when we started doing more interviews, it just seemed like a great idea to do a program called Patients at a Time on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. That's a shameless plug. And he and Mary Lynn Mathery, I think that was her name, Mary Lynn Mathery, brought together a lot of great interviews through their connections all around the world as well. They reached a global audience with their message because, as we all know, there is a global need for this medicinal plant. Right, Al? Byrne?
Yeah, I'm answering it. Yeah, thanks. And what we need to mention about all that interview stuff that Casper was just talking about is it's archived. It's available on Time for Hemp, and Casper is working on an editing process to make it more available, more understandable, and more current. But as he said, the interviews that I did with Mary Lynn Mathry on this show, I did most of them. She did about half with me, were with medical professionals. There might be PhDs doing research, or medical doctor doing clinician work, or registered nurses doing this or that. But they were all people from around the world who had really, really close experience with using cannabis medically. Not necessarily themselves, although some were, but they had this encounter with a patient or patients that they saw remarkably improve in one or several ways all at once, really, rather quickly, with the use of the cannabis plant as a food source or as a medicine. So anyway, those conversations are archived. There are going to be more of them archived. And I know those of you who are watching, it's just 3 old, what Casper says, we're geezers. Maybe we are. I don't know. What's a friggin' geezer? But 3 old geezers sitting around talking about this stuff. But let me tell you what, we know what the hell we're talking about. You ought to pay attention, you younger generation. I know you can't pay attention for 3 or 4 minutes or something, and you got to go see somebody die or something. But this is real stuff. And if you're a student out there, or if you've got somebody in your life, a family member, a good friend, a classmate, a teammate that's having some sort of trouble, and cannabis can help them, you ought to know about it, and we can help you teach them, and we can teach you. So this show is just the beginning show. This is a benchmark. We're trying to explain to anybody that might be interested in medical cannabis that here we are. We know what the hell we're talking about. The people we bring on this show, you might never heard of them. That doesn't matter. We know who they are, and they won't be on this show unless they're truly experts. You won't be hearing us interviewing some kind of cop or a lawyer. Not that we're afraid of cops and lawyers, but they're not medical cannabis people. They're cops and lawyers. But I go on this, but think about wherever you live in Canada or the United States, the rules being made about medical use of cannabis, a plant, are being made by cops and lawyers.
Oh, yeah. And
so,
a lot of them owned it.
And out there as an audience, how many other medical decisions in your life have you ever been made by a cop or a lawyer? So this is kind of what this show is about. We're gonna take this conversation. Sometimes we're going to be critical. Hey, we're going to be critical because criticism is necessary. And if the criticism that we put out is accurate and scientifically based, which it will be, you'll be listening to something that is real, something that is internationally proven to get to the point that Casper mentioned, and science, not opinion. Now, the rest of the world, let's just talk about the rest of the world. Al Graham's up here from Canada, and they're trying to have a decent medical cannabis program, but they're failing, just like the United States. But Europe has 27 countries where therapeutic cannabis is in their pharmacopoeia. Meaning their doctors, nurses, veterinarians, whatever, they can just use cannabis as a medicine because it's in their pharmacopoeia. 27 countries.
Yeah. And it used to be in the U.S.
Well, yeah, throwback places, you'd never want to go to, like, I don't know, Spain, France, United Kingdom, the Netherlands. Who wants to go there? Because they're all barbarians, right? So but the concept here is when you want to hear about medical cannabis, you're going to come to this show.
Now, I assume, being that you are a veteran, that you'll be speaking with some of the veterans on the broadcast?
Absolutely. I will find veterans and or their spouses, kids, friends, bosses, somebody that knows them well. And we will discuss with those people. Here's how it generally goes. I've done hundreds of these interviews. Men, women, all wars, all conflicts from various countries. It's always the same way. The military member has found herself a problem. It could be an emotional problem, a physical problem, or both. They come back to the States, they get out of the military, and their life goes to shit. Yeah. They drink too much, they get divorced, they lose their kids and jobs, they end up in jail. It's just a miserable friggin' existence. They go to the Veterans Administration. The Veterans Administration fills them full of pharmaceutical pills, all kinds of pills. How many pills you want? Here's a pill. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. We give you this pill. It screws up that other thing. So you got to take this pill to unscrew the thing we just gave you. But here, have a pile of them and take them every day.
Oh, yeah,
and as you might imagine, that whole guy's life just gets worse. Mm-hmm. It doesn't improve. It's totally screwed up now. And then she comes up one of her old Army buddies comes into town to just say hello to her. And he says, how's it going? And she says, Jesus, it sucks. I'm down. I mean, this is awful. What are you doing? I'm doing all this. And he says, why don't you just smoke a joint with me and see how that goes?
Yeah.
And changes her life. Within months, the pills go away. Her dog loves her again. And all they did was drop all their pharmaceuticals and swap it for cannabis.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is true of people that I've interviewed, hundreds. It also helped them quit smoking, nicotine, withdrawal, easy. And nothing's easy, but it made it as easy as possible. Alcohol withdrawal, sure. Opiate withdrawal, as Al Graham was mentioning earlier, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you stick with this program, and it's not going to be me. I'm not going to talk this shit. I'm going to ask the question, and you're going to hear a veteran in his or her own words talk to you for 15 or 20 minutes, and it won't take you that long to understand that this is real, and there's still injustice here. And that's why these programs like PACE and ours exist, because there's injustice. And it's our job to get it right. And so we're going to try really. Thank you.
Sharing, as I said earlier, sharing each other's stories helps educate other people and helps spread the knowledge, right?
So, and we are
the knowledge base is incredible there.
We are dealing with pioneers on this, because one of the things that really knocked my socks off too about Al Byrne and Patients at a Time was when you went to their website, you could take classes on their website if you were a doctor or a lawyer and get accreditation for that class. And they also did a variety of seminars each year where they brought together speakers from around the world, doctors from around the world who would attend their seminars, right, Al?
Yeah. Yes and no. We helped to form, and it's still in existence, the Medical Cannabis Institute.org. It's located out of Virginia. Doesn't really matter. It's an international medical site that has accredited online education for registered nurses, doctors, social workers, whatever, anybody that deals with the medical cannabis issue. So these visual educational sessions, you pay for them. It's not free. But that doc, that nurse, that researcher gets their these folks have to have yearly. They have to upgrade their education, and they get credits for that. And it's only certain things they can do to get that kind of authority. And this is one of them. So and people can still do that today. If you're a registered nurse in Kenya, you can go on to these websites and take a course on medical cannabis and learn out about medical cannabis from Charlottesville, Virginia. The same thing is true at the University of California, San Francisco Hospital. They were actually the first to do that for us. What we did was, to shorten it up, we would put on conferences, really, Casper, and they were accredited conferences. In other words, when I put on a conference for patients at a time, the American Medical Association and the American Nurses Association accredited my conference, meaning that nurses, doctors, social workers, PhDs, et cetera, that would come to that conference would get these yearly educational credits that they needed. Well, this was a hell of a step up. This is in a country at a time that said medical cannabis doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I'm running conferences for the AMA and the ANA that are saying, yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
And they still go on. And anyway, what we ended up doing was taking these conferences and basically taping them, recording them as we are with this program right now, and then putting them on the University of California's educational system, or this other one, the Medical Cannabis Institute educational system, and they go on today. And this is one of the ways that we internationally spread the news. Because again, when we put these up, a doctor in Australia, a nurse in Switzerland, doesn't matter. They could get on the internet and read about medical cannabis, learn about it, get it. So it's a hell of a breakthrough. Yeah, it's a hell of a breakthrough in the educational vacuum that existed, which doesn't exist now. What three of us are doing, to my audience here, is that there's not a vacuum there. But there's still a hell of a lot of misinformation, and there's still a lot of questions that need to be asked about the United States federal government policies and programs as they exist today, noting that the world understands this plant has incredibly good medicinal values. And here we have the leadership of the NATO and all that shit, the big deal, the United States. We can't figure that out. That's why we're still on and we're talking to folks.
It's just crazy. The United States, the way it is now, where you have half your states have it legally recreational, and the majority have it legal medicinally, and yet you're still illegal federally. It's just
it's illogical.
Yeah,
totally illogical. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I got this thing I deal with all the time when I'm dealing with this subject in the United States. I tell people, I just don't know what to do with stupid.
And it's got to be affecting patients. Like there's 39 states, I think, that have it legal for for medical. So there's still another dozen states that don't. And where do those patients? What do they do? Especially
they get screwed. They're screwed. That's what I'm saying. This whole thing doesn't make friggin' sense. And it doesn't make sense in Canada either. You were telling me earlier, Al, about how you can't even, a guy that has a cannabis license to sell cannabis in Canada can't really advertise the fact that he exists.
Yeah. The advertising rules are pretty stringent when it comes to cannabis. They're pretty nasty. It's hard for anybody to really get a foothold brand wise, because
it's bizarre.
It's hard for them to even get involved in local community stuff. So, they have to try to find ways around it in order to be able to get some advertising so people know where they are. They can't.
All the years that I've been doing this, like 40 or 45, I have no idea why I'm doing this. By that I mean this whole thing about how well this plant treats the world is staggering, and yet the vehemence, the dedication to dumbness is just beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I did what I did, and I'm glad I did it. But damn, I don't know why. It seems like such an obvious question. We have a plant. It's a plant. It's not a drug. I mean, I don't even know the damn fucking politicians understand the difference. But anyway, it's a plant. And as far as I'm concerned, in Canada, in the United States, in Nigeria, wherever the hell you want to take it, this plant should be under the control of the Department of Agriculture.
There's actually been, that was questioned here in Canada just recently.
Well, I mean, it's a plant.
I don't think. Yeah, exactly. It's a plant. It should be under agricultural, and not here. It's under Health Canada.
Same in the United States. We have plants in the United States. You guys might figure we do, and every single one of them is under the regulation and the watchful eye of our agriculture people who really do a good job.
Like here in Canada, for the medical end, for the medical end, it could be under Health Canada, but for all its productions and stuff like that, because our production is basically recreational. There are some medical licensed companies, but majority of it is all recreational. So why is it not under agriculture, like you say?
Because I know we do have the 2018 Farm Bill that made hemp legal to grow for the farmers here in America, coast to coast, and I think some of the states are taking advantage of that. But again, there are so much regulation, and in the states where medical marijuana or recreational marijuana is outlawed, it is hard for people who are farm owners and want to introduce hemp as a cash crop into their community to do so, because of the variety of regulations imposed upon their own particular state as well.
And the federal government, because in the United States, we have 48 contiguous states. So just stay with the big, there's this thing in America that's regulated by the federal government that's called interstate commerce. Well, if you've got what Casper's talking about, if you've got a legal hemp crop in Kentucky, you can't be driving a truck full of that stuff through Kansas, because Kansas is not legal, and the federal government, it isn't legal. You can't cross the state line. So if you've got a hemp crop in Kentucky, somehow you got to grow it, fix it up, market it, deliver it all inside of Kentucky. Well, that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
When you travel in America, if you're a medical cannabis user, you need to be conscientious if you're like leaving a medical marijuana state like Oregon, and you're going to a place like Indiana, not to have medical cannabis in your pocket when you land at the airport in Indiana. But if you're going to Las Vegas, where in Nevada it's legal, or you're going to Los Angeles, where in California medical cannabis is legal, you can put like a half ounce of marijuana into your luggage or to your pocket and fly from your home city to where you're going without any complications. So it causes you to have to stop and double check your travel plans before you move forward, right?
Other things, yeah. Anyway, the other thing we haven't even talked about, and it's super important to me with the cannabis plant, again, as a plant, is its nutritional value. I think, didn't you mention, Al Graham, Dr. What's his name? You met there at one of the conferences up in Canada.
Dr. Courtney talked about it being a vegetable.
Yeah, Courtney. Yeah, Dr. Courtney. This guy, if you don't know Dr. Courtney's background, he's a California physician. His wife was very, very ill. By the way, I met this couple, and she was gorgeous, man. She could have been a goddamn movie star. But anyway, her body deteriorated for no reason. A young, beautiful woman, a mother, and all that. He's a doctor. So he did all the doctor things. He went into all his doctor friends, and they stopped at nothing to try and figure out what was wrong with his wife. And it wasn't going well. And I remember inviting Dr. Courtney to the conference, and he spoke to us, and he related this story, and basically it wasn't going well. But he knew about the potential of cannabis as a cancer killer and all of the above, but he didn't want his wife to have any kind of emotional discomfort with using a lot of cannabis, because he had decided he was going to basically really load her up with cannabinoids. So this may not be known to you all or apparent to you all, but the ability for cannabis to give you your high or your medical level of dose, that cannabis has to be burning. It has to be on fire. It has to be at 384 degrees or some shit like that. If you eat cannabis cold, the seed, the leaves, there is no such emotional response to your body at all. What there is in your body is this nutritional boost beyond belief of all the good stuff that human beings need. And that's just what his wife needed. And with the eating of cannabis leaves, juiced, if you will. The stuff tastes terrible if you've ever tried one. It's like, I don't want to eat this. But you put it in a blender with some ice and a banana or something, and it's too bad. And that's what they gave her. And her health went back to remarkable, her beauty returned. And that's Dr. Courtney. And these kinds of
and that was just for eating cannabis leaves?
The leaves.
Juicing. She was juicing the leaves. Yeah.
That's
pretty
even
simple.
using the seed.
Having to process it into a jelly bean, or not processing it into a brownie, or that's just taking it off the plant, dropping it into a blender and adding a banana and some ice, and it gives you that much health benefit.
Yeah, and then there's the seed. The seed and the oil from that seed contains remarkable nutrition, let alone the leaves. Nobody really if you go to a movie theater in China, you go to a movie theater in the United States. If anybody goes to a movie theater anymore, you get a bucket of popcorn or jelly beans or something, whatever you want. In China, you get roasted hemp seeds. That's what you get when you get to a movie in China. Cool. This stuff is terrific food. Animals. I mean, I don't know how far we want to go today with these discussions, but you got this thing called an endocannabinoid system, and it's really important, and you probably never even heard of it. But the endocannabinoid system is a physiological system that exists in every living creature on Earth except insects. I'll say it again. Every living creature on Earth, you, your dog, your mother, the elephants, the eagles, the fish, every living creature on Earth. Well, this system is the mother of all systems for us. It runs everything. It runs our neural system. It runs our pulmonary system. It runs the immune system. It runs everything. And the best food to feed that system in a living creature is hemp seed oil.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Very important. Very important. No doubt about that. Now, let's throw some questions at Casper. Being that we haven't thrown any at him since we got started here. And,
you're not going to ask me if I stopped beating my dog now that I'm no longer an alcoholic, right?
No. No.
A little doggies by my feet. So yeah.
No, but for you yourself, you've got years, a couple of decades, as you mentioned, of audio and archives and stuff.
Over 3 freaking decades. My golly.
Well, this is the first video that you've done for Time for Hemp since you had a mustache and curly hair.
Pretty much. We did a 24-hour broadcast in 2020 on April 20th because of the world shutting down because of all the problems around the world. There was a lot of plans that were canceled at the last minute around the world because of that problem that showed up on the world stage. And a lot of members of the cannabis movement were rather annoyed that they couldn't get together and continue with their cannabis festivals and their cannabis symposiums and their cannabis. So we decided that we would just go ahead and get a Zoom conference going and invite a lot of our personal friends who'd been guests on the show around the world, and anywhere it was 420 at that time, we would just move the show to that part of the world. And it broadcast for 24 hours. Al was part of that as well. So was some of his friends and my friends. And it ended up being really historic. You can go to timeforhemp.news and you can click on the a love fest is what we ended up calling it, because it was a love fest. All of our friends were like our family, and we were sending love to the world about how important it is, like what Al Byrne was just saying there, for all from our heart to your heart. Take care of your heart, eat cannabis, use cannabis. And it turned out to be pretty historic, I think. And because of that, I've kept it up on the website so people can enjoy it. Mm. And as you mentioned, yeah, we do have an archive. I've got over 3.5 decades worth of content on the website that I think is important, and I know others, thank goodness, do as well. There are voices in there that are no longer with us, that we're giving a message to the world of how important it is to use cannabis for medical reasons, or how important it is to bring hemp back to the world stage as a cash crop so that our farmers can have a successful farming business, and we can create products that are made from the earth and stimulate jobs in our local areas and keep our economies going and create products that are long lasting. And I get off my soapbox, but I got on my soapbox by accident when I met Jack Hare, which is how I began doing Time for Hemp. And his voice is in there as well, along with, again, so many other voices. And there are, thank goodness, many voices in my archive that are still with us that we can get up to date with. But because of the large number of people who are archived on the network and on the website, I feel a sense of responsibility to maintain that website and to make certain that that archive of voices is available to the world to hear.
Yeah.
So after leaving it dormant since basically 2017, because I just got too old. I mean, it happens. It happens to all of us. If you've seen Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, I mean, how Mick Jagger, he waddles onto stage. Oh my God, it's sad. Well, it happens. And I've got this great archive that I got to figure out how to continue to draw traffic to. Thank you very much. I hope you come and check out this show and all of our other stuff, but also figure out how to eventually keep it on the internet and maybe find somebody who can use it as a platform to keep the voices alive and keep the world knowing how important it is to take Time for Hemp.
Oh, I knew that was coming. I saw that.
So
Well, let me just echo him a little bit here. The voices, again, it's some of those people are gone, some of them haven't, but the ones that are gone, but they left their wisdom behind in interviews. And Bob Melamid, you mentioned, he's in one of those guys. Dr. Lester Grinspoon, endless. That information, even though it might be 5 years old or 10 years old, is still valid.
Oh, yeah.
It needs to be reheard by new generations, new people that can take it and do what others have done ahead of them, but keep I'm a partner in this thing with Casper, so I'm biased. All right. And a lot of the archives he's talking about is my work. So I'm biased. I'm proud of what I did.
Sure.
But this stuff should be in a museum. This information that is on these videos needs to be archived way beyond our capabilities. So, is anybody out there that wants to have a conversation about how to do that and help us do it, we'd appreciate it.
And the other thing I think is important about the archives is, as you mentioned, let's say Dr. Bob Melamede or Dr. Lester Grinspoon, oftentimes you'll see an article where they're being quoted. They'll say Dr. Melamede said this and Dr. Lester Grinspoon said that. When you come to our archive, you can hear from the horse's mouth exactly what they said. You can hear from Keith Stropp, the founder of National Normal, why it was he started that organization. You can hear from Jack Hare why it was he began writing that book. You can hear from Mark Emery, long before they put him in jail, why it was he was fighting American policies and how American policies were interfering with Canadian policies. You can hear from the horse's mouth, so there's no misunderstanding, no misconstruement, no misinformation being put forward. We certainly are, I can honestly say, putting out the truth.
Yeah. When I was doing the documentary movies at cafes, which I did for 5 years, that's what, I mentioned the movie What If Cannabis Cured Cancer? And that's what it was. It was an opportunity for those who were watching the video to hear from the horse's mouth, to hear from Dr. Lester Grinspoon or some of the other doctors that are out there. And they're the researchers. They're the ones who studied it all. No chance of the misinformation.
Well, I just think history is important. Those that don't know, I'm going to plug myself, but I wrote a book. It's called For Country and Cannabis. You can buy it online anywhere, Amazon, Apple, Barnes & Noble, wherever it is. And there's an ebook too. But I wrote the book for the same reason that Casper and I and Al are involved in this sort of educational conversation, is that not only is the information that was provided important, so are these people. You go into Colorado and you go into a dispensary and you're a recreational user and you get a good quality product and you're happy with all of that happening. Well, somebody did that for you. It just didn't happen. And so the people that are on this Time for Hemp interview process and the people in my book For Country and Cannabis, they're the people that did it. And if you're involved in that business, if you're involved in the medical issue, if you're a doctor, a nurse, or a researcher, you need to know this stuff. You don't know what we know. I don't care how educated you are about medical cannabis. You don't know what I know. You don't. And when you put what these interviews are on a continuous basis, hundreds of hours here. We're not talking snippets. We're not talking. Here's a little quote from Dr. Melamede. We're talking about Doc Melamede talking to Bob Melamede talking for 45 minutes. And boy, was that a smart guy. Gone. Another voice gone. But nevertheless, what he left behind is invaluable. So please look at what we're doing here. My book, this show, what Al's doing in Canada, this is important stuff. And
I'm trying to make it, as Al Byrne said, I'm trying to make it digestible and easy to access. So I'm doing what they call remastering, which is that's from our day. Well, I'm taking out all the content where they talk about going to the next Hemp Fest, or they're talking about any kind of local politics, and I'm just leaving the meat of each interview in. So I'm trying to make certain that their content is presented properly, but in such a way that it does hold interest. And as Al also pointed out, one of the things that I think is rather interesting that I probably will not be able to edit into the remasters is the drama that is found in the archives that will probably be left out in the remastering. Meaning, You hear Eddie Lepp talk about how it was last night in this case, where the feds showed up on his 40-acre farm and ripped out 20 acres of marijuana plants and arrested his wife, or you hear about how Mark Emery just got out of jail yesterday, and he's got to go to court next week because the United States government is trying to extradite him from Canada into America, put him in prison for 10 years. So you hear as it is happening at the time. And that makes, from my point of view, as a historian anyway, the content to be more interesting. You also hear people like Michelle Rainey talk about how she was first diagnosed with cancer. And then you also hear another interview or two, her talking about overcoming it and then not. And then you hear a couple more interviews how she's letting everybody know it's time to say goodbye because she won't be here to tell the world how important medical cannabis is, but to please keep her message going. So you hear the history and the growth of each guest sometimes, and how our movement progressed from the 1980s to the point where it is today. If you have that kind of time to go through all of the archives and their details. But if you don't, I'm going to try to go through and put together the best of our interviews and remaster them so you get the best of everything when you come and take Time for Hemp.
Now, you mentioned Michelle Rainey. She's in our thoughts all the time, and she is watching. This is a caricature picture that was drawn of Michelle Rainey, and she sits right here beside it, and she's involved in every broadcast that I do here at Pace Radio Network. Pictures in the background.
Well, that's why I named Patients at a Time, Patients at a Time.
Yeah.
Patients at a time. I mean, it's right there. It's a little phrase, but virtually all the patients except one that I formed that company with, that nonprofit, are dead. They ran out of time.
They're patients that are, it's always left to the patients that are fighting and arguing, trying to get access to their medication, having to take, the government to court. And, patients they're not, working, making piles of money to be able to take governments or anybody to court. And, unfortunately here in Canada, that's where a lot of the change was made, was because of patients pushing the envelope to get change.
Well, Allison Burden told me a couple of times that she honestly believed that Time for Hemp had the most medical cannabis patients on the broadcast than any other broadcasts out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I agree completely with you, Al. That's what I found when we started in the 80s and 90s and started doing the conferences. It was the testimony, if you will, of the patients that people paid attention to. They'd had the hype. They listened to the journalists. They know senators aren't worth shit. But all of a sudden, here comes a young woman, an old man, a kid, and they say, I use cannabis, and everybody pays it. They believe them, and they should believe them. And that's another thing I'll just say, and you're going to hear this if you listen to us over the months. In the conversation in Canada and in the United States especially, you'll hear what we're talking about. We're talking about patients who are real people, had a real problem, used cannabis, and they got real relief. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. All right, now, what the medical community calls that is a case study. They actually have a number for it. It's called an N of 1, N being the study, 1 being the patient. It's a study of one patient. Well, here in America, if you give that information to a high-priced, big-time journalist at CBS, or you want to talk to some representative or senator from your state, that becomes an anecdote. It's an anecdote. It's American language. You can call stuff by anything you want, but they call it an anecdote. I call it a case study. And more importantly, so does the medical community. So if the medical community is okay with it as a case study, and by the way, N of 1, and there's tens of thousands of those studies, is hardly anecdotal. It's tens of thousands of studies of real people who have gotten real relief.
That's why I kind of giggle, because when you call it a case study, it's like they've been doing case studies on cannabis since the beginning of time.
It's the most studied plant on earth.
It is. Yeah, I know.
We need
more studies. We need more studies. Christ, it's like you said. It's
now let me jump in for a minute. I've got to be honest, too. I honestly believe I was there at the birth of the medical cannabis movement when I watched Jack Hare and Dennis Perrone argue with one another. When Jack Hare was working on the California hemp initiative,
right?
And Dennis showed up and said, "You're not going to win with that, Jack. Nobody cares about hemp products. They know about hemp products. What they have forgotten about is the medical aspect of it." And Jack said, "No, we need to make sure that people don't forget about the hemp products you can make." And Dennis said, "They're not going to listen to you about that." And Jack said, "Well, we need your support." And Dennis said, "I can't support that." And Jack said, "You have to. We're going to do this California hemp initiative." And Dennis said, "Well, I'm going to do Proposition P." And he went and did Proposition P because he told Jack the only way you would get this plant legalized is if you went medical and let go of the aspect of the hemp plant as a production source for paper, fiber, and fuel. And that really frosted Jack's buns. And because of that, there was a long, ongoing 32-year conversation between those two about medical cannabis and paper, fiber, fuel.
Well, I got in the middle of both. I got in the middle of both of those guys in that time frame. I was running normal, and Jack comes in. I think I've told this story, but probably not to your audience. But Jack shows up one day at a board meeting, and he's got the ugliest sport coat I have ever seen in my existence. He's wearing this thing. It's like what is that? Michael's coat of many colors in the Bible, and it was a sport coat, but it didn't fit. It was the sleeves with different lengths. I mean, it was ridiculous. But it was made of hemp. And what Jack wanted from the board at Normal was he wanted the copyright to the word hemp. And for whatever reason, Normal had it. And so he came to the board meeting and he was talking hemp, hemp, hemp. And I'm talking to people and I'm saying, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Where's he from? Anyway, Jack and I became great friends. But then almost at the same time period, Dennis shows up and he says, "Al, I want you to," he's a vet. Well, both these guys are vets now. Jack Army and Dennis Air Force. And I'm Navy. So we talked that level. And Dennis shows up and he says, "Al, I want to get on the board. Put me on the board." I put him on the board. What he wanted was he got it. He wanted Normal to have its conference in San Francisco to help get him moving with Prop P. And we did that. One of the few times Normal ever went out of D.C. for a conference. We went there for Dennis, and true to his word, he told me, he said, "You put me on the board, I'll get what I want, I'm going to resign." And that's just what he did. But anyway, yeah, and those guys, by the way, loved each other, greatly respected each other. But they were both leaders and they were both correct. The people that were incorrect were the people at Normal who I had to contend with, who were mainly the lawyer faction, almost always the lawyer faction, and they were absolutely riveted on legalization. This is it. We push legalization. That's what this organization does. I came in and I said, "No, I like this guy, Jack. I like Dennis. I like what they're talking about." And from a military point of view, I looked at it and was like, well, wait a minute. If the feds are fighting Normal, and they were, and legalization, which was that's what they did, we'll give them a couple of other problems. We'll have a couple of other divisions out there in the field. We'll have this hemp thing. Now they got to fight the hemp thing, and we'll have the medical marijuana thing, which turned out to be medical cannabis. So those guys and I, we were simpatico. We loved each other, but we were all going in a kind of a different way, but we were all going there together, and it worked. And if you look at that history, we're going back to the mid 80s when all this started. But if you look at that history, we got hemp's a done deal here in the United States. Medical cannabis is pretty much a done deal here in the United States, and we still don't have legalization in the United States. So there's your history.
Dennis was right, but so was Jack, because in 2018, the hemp farm bill, the farm bill made hemp a legal cash crop coast to coast in America. So in some ways they were both right, but sadly they were also both right that it would probably take a couple of decades to make it happen, even though they couldn't figure out, like you and I, they couldn't figure out why. I mean, common sense tells you can make these products. This is good for medicine. This is a good food. We should grow it. We should make it legal. But we don't deal with leaders who have common sense. Well, except for Castro's son, who's in charge of Canada. Right, Al?
Yeah, we have legal cannabis here. Yes, we do. The one thing, though, about legal cannabis for us up here is that they recently did a Cannabis Act review, and they had an expert panel that went around and asked questions. One of the questions at the time was question 5.2 that asked if people thought that a brick and mortar storefront could replace the medical program. So that would mean that patients would be going to the recreational store to be their only access for cannabis. Part of the problem there is, how do you deal with a young child who's using cannabis for epilepsy to deal with the seizures and that? A parent that would have to go in and purchase that cannabis for that child would be then subject to laws up to 14 years in prison for giving the child cannabis.
Well, beyond that,
but in the end, the review.
There's a hell of a difference between medical grade cannabis and cannabis. Your medical grade assumes a certain purity, a certain ability to define what's in it. I mean, to the specifics. And if you're talking about giving medicine to a sick person or giving medicine to a child, you want that kind of scrutiny. Now,
here in Canada, it's the same products.
I understand, and that's wrong. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. There has to be in all of our countries a dual standard, one for recreational use. Okay, that's like getting a can of beer. We know the beer has been pasteurized. It's in a can. It's cold. It's all right. But then if I'm not going to buy my medical products out of my grocery store, and that should be the same thing for cannabis. There's a way for the general public to have a good, pure, licensed product sold in a brick and mortar or wherever. But there's also that medical need for a much higher standard quality product.
See, our medical patients cannot go into a medical store to get medical cannabis. There's only one store in Canada that is a medical cannabis store where patients can do that, where it's legal.
Well, that's
the rest of all our stores, our other 4,000 plus stores, are all recreational stores, and the bud tenders cannot talk medical purposes or anything.
We're right back to my stupid. That's stupid. That's illogical. And who made those decisions? Did doctors make those decisions?
No, federal government.
Was it politicians? Maybe.
They were politicians. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, I don't know about Canada, but I look at politicians down here as, really? These people can walk and talk at the same time? They're dumb as stones. They can't get along with each other, and they don't get anything done. And what they do get done is follow their leader, and the leader doesn't know what's going on. So, there you go. There's your medical cannabis program in both countries, right there. Run by people that are idiots.
Except for that one genius, Dr. Fauci. And Dr. Fauci taught us all one thing. It just takes one prick, boom, to rob your freedom.
Well, we can't go there now. We're talking about cannabis,
Yeah,
let's not go there. This is
All right. That's
this is why Casper
I
has a co-host.
There is
and I say no, Casper, no.
There is one aspect of our medical program that you do like, and that is the fact that our veterans have access to medical cannabis, and that the government will cover 3 grams. They used to cover 10 grams, but now they cover 3 grams, and the patients have to apply to go higher than that. But our program will pay 3 grams a day for veterans.
And it's free. It's free, and it's delivered. Yeah, and I'm as a veteran in the United States, I applaud that. I wish they didn't have that. I mean, 3 grams is pretty good, but it could be better. But as you say, they're going to apply for that. But yeah, that should be the case here in the United States and in every other country in the world.
Well, and Al Byrne and I both know this hardworking activist named Michael Krowitz, who originally made it possible for American military veterans to have access to medical cannabis in their state if their state allowed medical cannabis without losing their veterans benefits.
Yeah, that was crazy. That they fought the war for freedom, but yet you're going to take away a plant that's going to help them.
Well, that would be one of my major conversation pieces on when I talk about veterans on Time for Hemp, will be the inequality of veteran treatment in the United States concerning cannabis as a medicine. It's totally unequal. It's based upon the veterans, where the veteran lives. If she lives in Indiana, she can't use cannabis and be treated in a Veterans Administration hospital. If she lives in Maine, she can. What the fuck is that?
Well, I hear Jack here in the back of my head telling me, yes, we are, Dennis, going to talk about medical cannabis, but we're also going to talk about hemp as a cash crop. And we will also be having people who do make hemp foods and who will have companies that make hemp clothing. And we will have an occasional lawyer or two who defends people who've been arrested for using medical cannabis. One of the things that I did on the Time for Hemp broadcast when I was doing it 5 days a week was have a gentleman on every Wednesday, and we called it Leap Day. It was the law enforcement against prohibition. And we had Peter Chris on, who was the founder of the law enforcement against hemp cannabis prohibition. And we would bring on people from his organization, and we had like chiefs of police who got tired of being called out to arrest medical cannabis patients or even marijuana users when there was real crime. We had lawyers on who were lobbying for new laws in Congress and the Senate, or who were defending people who were up against many years of imprisonment for utilizing this plant. And we also had people who created great products and who opened new dispensaries and did a variety of other aspects as well. So we will be focusing on medical cannabis. That is absolutely true. But I did get involved into this movement because of Jack Hare, who said we cannot afford a budget for advertising. We got the Partnership for a Drug-Free America, trying to make sure our message is not heard. Can you help? And I went down to community cable, where when it's released, it becomes public domain, and put together this little broadcast called Time for Hemp that allowed us to use some of that content in our advertising, and also gave me a 35-year career or more working as a hemp activist, letting everybody know how important it is to take time for hemp.
And with that, let's thank Al Graham for being our guest. Again, Al, it's always a pleasure to talk. We'll be doing more of it in the future.
Yes.
And I just want you to know that I'm working with a group, 6 different vet podcasts here in the United States, different guys in different parts of the country. and they all want to join on with Pace and us
Oh.
as well. So we'll be talking about that pretty soon too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yes, we'll have to get together and discuss that. That's for sure.
Oh, we will. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about people advocating cannabis education. That's what we're all doing.
Yep.
Right.
It has been fun to do this broadcast. I tell you, the first one since 2017. Back then, it was just audio, because it's true. I know Gatewood Galbraith used to tell me that I had a face for radio, and I believe it the older I get. But, you know, I'm going to be in your face about telling the truth about how important it is to make medical cannabis available to everybody who needs it, how important it is to make this wonderful plant a cash crop, everybody who wants to be able to grow it and create products from it and make fuel from it and food from it. And, well, I'll get on my soapbox on the next segment. But this has been the first broadcast, and we're going to do what we can, of course, like all other broadcasting as we move along. We're going to try to grow, be better at production, and do more pops and whistles with our special effects. But right now, it's just the three of us saying to the whole world around us, please let everybody know how important it is to take time for him.
Time for him.